Why are we here today, Ron?
Because Q, we're here to talk about my favorite position, perhaps to grade besides the fat boys up front, and that is running backs.
So when we first started the project this year, and we're talking about NFL draft prospects, to be clear, for the Chicago Bears. But when we first started this year, and I was talking to you about doing running backs with you, I was like, I'm kind of nervous about it. I felt like I didn't have a good feel for running backs the last 2 years, and like you told me as an offensive line guy, just think about it as if you're the offensive lineman, right? Like, how do you feel about what the running back is doing behind you? Do you feel
Yeah,
like he got enough? Do you feel like he should have done something different? And man, the feel for it has really come to me this year. I've started to become really opinionated in my running
that's
back
good.
take.
That's
Which
good.
in previous years it was very like I don't really know how to argue anything, but like this year I do feel pretty convicted in it, which probably means I'm going to get them all wrong. But either way, we're here to talk running backs. And before we get into like Scott from Iowa says, RBs are cool and tough, just not at 10, according to him. We'll see. I don't have a strong opinion on that, believe it or not,
Agreed.
actually. But before we get into the draft prospects too much, we want to answer 3 questions. What do the Bears have at running back? What does a running back look like in this offense? And how much draft capital will the Bears be spending at running back? To Scott's comment. Now, to start this off, Ron, what do the Bears have at running back right now?
Well, obviously, I think the two names that everybody's most familiar with certainly are DeAndre Swift, who obviously has 2 more years on that deal that he signed last free agency. Obviously, a very different, a yin to a yang in terms of free agency for 2024 to 2025 for the Chicago Bears. But obviously, he is still the lead back, at least as of now. We'll see when we're talking again in May, but for now, he's still the guy. Roschon Johnson still on the roster. Bears used fourth-round draft capital on him a few years ago. And then Ian Wheeler, I know, has been a name that people I've noticed have still included as a part of that Bears room. Obviously, we didn't really get to see a whole lot of him because of the season-ending injury in preseason, but the limited amount of action that he did have as really just an undrafted free agent coming in and being I don't want to say a body on the roster because that's not the right term, but being a guy that I think had low expectations for a lot of people, I think he definitely exceeded those expectations. Maybe not to like he's guaranteed a roster spot level in this coming season, but they kept him around. They kept him as an injured part of the roster. So I think they feel pretty highly about him as well. And I think it's at least worth at least including him in the conversation here because he'll at least probably be in training camp with the team once August rolls around.
Yeah, I mean, he had some pretty wild speed that you'd love to get on the field. And I'm
Absolutely.
with you. I'm not saying that he deserves a roster spot or like he's gonna get one. Heck, I mean, I don't. I'm actually curious now. I wonder how many running backs the Lions did roster last year. Because I imagine it might have been 4, honestly, with how much running they do and how much it matters to what they did. But you figure Swift's here. You figure Johnson's probably here. I figure Johnson's gonna be here, but it wouldn't shock me if he's not here that much longer if Ben Johnson doesn't see a strong reason to have him around. But for him not to have a strong reason to have him around would shock me because the entire selling point on Roschon Johnson is the locker room guy, the work ethic, the special teams contributions. Like he can do everything. So even if he's 3rd or 4th running back on the roster, like I'd be shocked if he was just gone because he gives you all that.
Definitely. In referencing your point about the Lions, according to this, they had 5 running backs on the roster. Now, I would imagine that Jamar Jefferson was mostly a practice squad guy, only played 2 games, but Sion Vaki had 16 games, Craig Reynolds 17 games, 14 for Monty, 17 for Gibbs. So you have to think that like they pretty much carried 4 running backs throughout most of the season with the Reynolds and Vaki playing more special teams than anything else. But yeah, man, I agree with you. What does a Ben Johnson running back look like? I think I don't know if we have an answer to that question. I know it's really easy for a lot of people to point the finger and say, well, it's Jahmyr Gibbs or David Montgomery. It's like, well, yeah, but he had a lot of success with those players. But think back to 2022. His backfield was DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams, right? A very different looking group. But I do think the one thing that we can come down to and at least boil down from at least his time as a play caller is he likes to have a yin and a yang in his backfield, right? Two guys that are very different. They do a lot of the same things well, but at the same time, each one has their very kind of glaring strengths of like, oh, okay, I see why you're on the roster, but then I also see why this guy's on the roster, and I see why you guys share a backfield. So to me, that's what it is, I think, for Ben Johnson. Now, granted, if you get one really explosive running back and then have an okay off pace guy, you probably can get away with it as well and still feel like it's a Ben Johnson team. But I mean, look at the amount of success that Monty and Gibbs were both able to have, even splitting touches. I mean, it just goes to show Ben Johnson wants to pound the rock. And if he's got more guys that can do it efficiently and at a high level, he's going to have them on the roster.
Yeah, I think the best, because I think the way you touched on the two guys who complement each other, yin and yang, I think that's perfect. But I think I do see a trend in what a Ben Johnson running back is. It is so today, Ben Johnson had a quote, or maybe it was yesterday, a quote about what they're looking for on offensive line. And he was like, I want them, mean, dirty, tough,
Nasty.
and smart. And I think that's what he wants at running back too. Because I mean, you might say Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't fit that. Have you ever seen Jahmyr Gibbs pass block? That dude puts people on their asses, and he has no right doing it. Like, he wants grit at his running back. He wants his running back to match his offensive line with intensity, with grit, and that's my opinion, at least. I think that, and you look at, like, you go back to like Jamal Williams when he was there, another guy who fits that same mold. And I feel like his time in Miami, there, even though he wasn't a play caller, but like those Miami running backs back then also kind of fit that mold to a degree, being bigger, tougher runners, where I don't think it necessarily has to be big because, like you said, the yin and the yang. But like I'm thinking like Jay Ajayi and like
I was gonna say, was Jay Ajayi there? That was gonna be my exact question to you. I'm like trying to line up timelines in my head.
I mean, I think it was just in my head. Like I'm kind of going off the top. I think you're right. I think that matches, and so to me, that's what I'm looking for in these running backs is that grit, that want to, that drive, to do the things that not everyone does.
I like that you said that because you can even throw Monty into the discussion as well, right? Of like running backs that fit that mold and what they do. And I'll tell you what, now that you've said that, there's like a very clear set of guys that we're going to talk about today that, in my opinion, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a Ben Johnson guy.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think there's also a lot of guys that we're going to talk about today that I immediately go, I don't know if that's a Ben Johnson guy based on what you said, because I think you're onto something, Q. I really do. I never thought about it that way. And I'm glad you shared that, because now that changes my perspective on, just quickly, I mean, we both did our homework on these guys. I know you watched a nauseating amount of film on other positions as well. I was more running back focused this year, but just that quick thought of addition to the body of work of our film study immediately, I think, has changed my opinion on a few guys, at least in terms of a fit for the Bears. Maybe not as like, are they going to be a good pro or not, but certainly, are they going to be a Chicago Bear or not?
Yeah. And the non, like, I guess, meatball football guy answer, the more X's and O's answer, I think, is a guy who has no scheme limits. I don't want a zone only runner. I don't want a gap only runner. I want a guy who has a good feel for both. But Ron, how much draft capital do you think we see the Bears spend at running back?
Oh man, I'm on board with, I think, Scott, in the sense of like, I don't know if they need to do that at 10. Now, granted, if the draft shakes out in a way where Ashton Gentsy's the best player available and you want that guy, go get him. I'm in favor of that. But I do think if, a Mason Graham somehow slips to number 10, if, there's a guy that they're very convicted on about, maybe a Josh Simmons there at number 10, I would even see a world where if the Bears could swing it, maybe just moving back a few picks. Somebody's really desperate to get up to 10 because they like a certain guy. Maybe they're willing to part ways with an extra. And probably because of this year's draft, you're probably not going to get a ton of draft capital. You're not going to get what the Bears got for, Justin Fields moving up 9 spots or whatever it was. But maybe you get a 3 in this year's draft. Maybe you get like a 2 next year or something. I think that's very plausible. And obviously a flip of first rounders. I think they're going to take a running back with one of those 2 second-round picks. I really do. I think that is the sweet spot. Unless things go completely haywire from picks, we'll call it 20 to 35, where a bunch of guys go that people don't expect, and all of a sudden there's guys that they weren't expecting to be there at 39 and 41 that all of a sudden are, then I could see them punting maybe to 72. But one of their first 4 picks is going to be a running back. That at least I am very convicted on, of like, if they come out, if they leave the 3rd round and there isn't a running back drafted already, I would be so surprised. I would happily live stream myself drinking Chicago handshakes, talking football with you on this show, because I really do like it. It's in the first 4, but my gut tells me it's in one of those 2 second-round picks. What do you say, Q?
I think in the first 4 picks, you have an offensive guard, an edge rusher, a defensive tackle, and a running back in some order. I don't know what the order is yet. I think edge rusher needs to be one of the first 2 picks. So that's either 10 or 39. And even at 39, I'm skeptical of what you're actually getting there anymore. So like in my mind, 10 almost has to be an edge rusher at this point. And I think you're going O-line with 39 or 41. I'm the tough point is there's going to be a strong desire to take running back at 39 or 41, I think. And it's such a deep defensive tackle class. I know you can probably get some really good defensive tackles at 72, but man, I'm just in love with some of the guys who are going to be there at 41. And I'm just like, I don't know how you pass on them. Like, so it's a tough spot there.
Yeah, I think that's, to me, not to get too far off the rabbit hole, because obviously we're here to talk about running backs today, but I think that's why if the Bears somehow can move down from 10, they're absolutely going to, especially if they have like a slew of guys that they really like, but they're pretty confident are going to be there if they moved back 5 to 10 spots. I could see a world where, if you move back far enough, I think you could get another 2 in this year's draft. If somebody's real convicted, like maybe like a team like Baltimore, somebody who's closer to a contending window, that's like, oh, we really want that guy because he's going to fill a need. Maybe you get another 2 and another 3. And then all of a sudden, to your point, Q, that opens up tons of options, because now you're not just pigeonholed to like, well, we have 39-41. We want to take a back here. Maybe you end up getting 51 as well in the second round. Maybe that's where you go running back. And I think that could be something that we really keep an eye on as whispers and rumors start to come when we get a little closer to the end of April.
Yeah, I don't think this will happen, but like if Shedeur Sanders falls, Pittsburgh's sitting there saying we need a quarterback, like I don't think Pittsburgh is going to trade much. Like that, it's not their style, but just an idea.